And round five, going for the 5-0. Unfortunately, this hand is not going to get us a 5-0. It has no mana whatsoever. And this basically is not any better. And again, I don't like going down to anything lower than five. So we have a somewhat reasonable five-card hand. Got plenty of interaction in the form of blast, so some of them are going to go to the bottom. Welder can be good. And if we're lucky, we can just cheese out a win with a turn two Blood Moon. Of course, we're on the draw, so it may not be that good, but you never know. We bought him a couple of the blasts. I would keep more blasts if we had a way to actually use one of them to protect this Blood Moon. But since we don't, I want to have a kind of a range of things that the hand can do. So this way we get to have welder shenanigans. Possibly we have turn one, well, turn two Blood Moon, and we have a Pyroblast, as opposed to just having Blood Moon and a bunch of blasts. So this is so far looking like a Delver. We got the Ragavan, and I'm just going to run up this Goblin Welder and hopefully block and trade with the Monkey. Unfortunately, we don't get to do that. And it's lucky that we're able to possibly pay for a daze on this Blood Moon with Spirit Guide, but even that may not be good enough because if this monkey goes uncontested, he'll just get treasure tokens to pay for whatever he wants. So he does have a daze. We do pitch Spirit Guide, but he also has Force of Will. So at this point, we're probably looking to at offering up this Engineer for the monkey, but the opponent actually hits a Karn off the top of my deck, and so we didn't draw a land here to play this Recruiter, and even if we had drawn a land, we would have lost the City of Traders, and we can't combo them out at this point anyway until we draw Painter plus red mana, resolve a blast. So I decided to concede, and we'll go on to the next game. Now, at this point, I'm not sure if this is a kind of Delver version or a controlling version. This is pretty clearly, um, the blue, white, red build. So I assume there's monster mentor things like Teferi, but the question is how many of those things are there? So I decided to kind of hedge between what I do for controlling decks and what I do for blue, red, Ragavan, Delver style decks. So we're still bringing in the additional blast, the additional bolts. Normally, I would have cut more of the fast mana if I thought I was going up against control, but this time I'm only cutting one of the Lotus Petals because I think we might be up against a more Delver type strategy. And we have seen days, so fast mana becomes a lot more valuable. Also, since we might be up against a kind of Delver style, there might be wastelands, so I'm cutting cards that require white mana. And if this is the kind of controlling version, which it probably is since it's playing white, then we might not have to worry so much about turn one threats. So Portable Hole diminishes a lot in value. I usually board out one Karn against Delver, so I'm kind of doing that too in this matchup. Apprentice comes in against Delver anyway, usually just as a filler, but it can be fine in the matchup. But it's pretty good against the control style builds too, so I'm bringing that in. So this is the hedge between the Delver and the controlling Ragavan style decks. Okay, so that's that. We'll be back for game two, and hopefully this time we will have a better draw. We're on the play of game two, and we've got turn one Blood Moon. This is a little bit risky. If Blood Moon doesn't resolve, then we're stuck with a City of Traders at our one land, and then we play the Willowfoot Hills, it'll go away. But I think Blood Moon is likely to be good. Last game we saw fetches, a volcanic island, and a tundra, and so it's likely that Blood Moon could just completely lock out the opponent. We even have a lightning bolt to deal with possible Ragavan, whether before or after Blood Moon. Now, even if Blood Moon resolves and he's still able to cast Ragavan, we can still bolt it. So I think we'll keep this, and we'll hope for the best with this turn one Blood Moon. And it resolves, hooray! So now we are looking to dodge a monkey, preferably for a long time. And there's not, I think, that much reason to play out a Painter here. It's possible that Painter gets Force Willed, which is not the worst thing in the world to have backup, but if the opponent follows up with a Dashed Monkey, then we will not be able to bolt it if we play Painter. And at this point, I really just, like, there are not that many cards in the deck that the opponent can have that can actually win. I think it's probably just going to be Monkey and uh, maybe some kind of artifact, or maybe he has some other large red card. Uh, So I'm really just want to play a little bit conservatively until we have mana to also play Painter with Blast backup now that we have Power Blast. Yeah, still not drawing mana, and at this point, there's another reason not to play out Painter, that if it gets forced, it's possible that the opponent brought in Surgical Extraction, and then we will get two Painters Surgical out of our hand. I'm really not willing to risk that. Anyway, we draw a Crater Maker, and since it seems like the opponent does not have a monkey, I would like to get this Crater Maker in play right now. If he Force of Wills this, it's really no big deal, but if he doesn't, then it's a source of damage, and it's a shock on a stick to deal with Monkey at any point in the game. So I'm happy to just get that on the battlefield as soon as possible. Yeah, and we continue to not draw lands, so there's still no reason to play these painters for the reasons we already talked about. So we're just waiting to draw mana. Opponent has Pyroclasm, which is interesting, obviously clearing the way for this Retrofitter Foundry. And now, rather than discard hand size, I'm taking a chance on the painter. Playing the painter here also means that even if we don't draw land, we can untap and blast Foundry. And I'm playing a bit of a game of chicken here with the opponent on my end step. If the opponent doesn't do anything, I have to discard hand size, in which case we'll probably discard the bridge, since if you're discarding the hand size and centering bridge, it's probably not going to be very good. But if the opponent does do something, then we can, in response, Power Blast. And part of the reason to do this, it's kind of a small thing. If the opponent decides to, if the opponent, if we just Pyroblast immediately without going to our instep, then the opponent can just make another servo, and then you have two servos. But if we wait for the opponent to blink and try to upgrade the servo, then we can leave him with just a Thopter and get rid of the Foundry at the same time. And at this point, given that the opponent is still playing the game, I'm thinking that he has some way to get rid of this Blood Moon. And if he's then able to follow that up with an Urza Saga, I want him to have one fewer artifact reach on the board. So, okay, we finally drew the third land, so now I don't have any problem playing out a backup painter, and we're just going to trade one damage back and forth. I'm playing the bridge here not because I expect to actually use it. I just want to have an artifact that I don't particularly care about in play so that I can use Goblin Welder to protect. Right, an opponent concedes to Goblin Engineer, which he knows is going to go get Grindstone. So opponent presumably doesn't have Surgical in hand. Anyway, so we won the game based on the back of Turn 1 Blood Moon, which is what Turn 1 Blood Moon is good for. Happens sometimes. And we'll be back for game 3. All right, now we're back for the last game of the league. If we win, we go 5-0. Uh, this hand is probably going to be fine. It's soft to daze because if he plays a turn 1 monkey, we're going to be pretty much obligated to bolt it, and it's vulnerable to daze. And if even if it resolves, then our follow-up engineer is vulnerable to daze. And if we don't draw a soul land, then recruiter will be vulnerable to daze. But we have a pretty good mana situation. We have our white mana already. Two engineers gives us a lot of pressure on the opponent to make a move. Recruiter can find painter. Uh, engineer can find grindstone. So we kind of have a path to combo. So I think this is probably going to be good enough. I wish that we had a blast, but I'm not going to mulligan this hand to go look for one. And there's not even a monkey. Yeah, and so we ran into the expected days, and uh, I think it's important enough to let this engineer resolve that I am going to pitch the Spirit Guide over it. The only reason not to pitch Spirit Guide would be that if we allow this to get dazed, the opponent follows up with dashed Ragavan, we might want to Simian Spirit Guide, bolt the monkey. Um, I'm not sure I would make that play anyway, uh, but I at least would rather have the option. Since we have a second engineer, might actually prefer to block hypothetical monkey with this guy rather than spend Simian Spirit Guide and bolt on it. But I also do want to just get an artifact in the graveyard right now so we can start hopefully getting some value off these goblins. So we do want this first one resolved. Okay, opponent's not doing anything, obviously with the intention of making a construct. And I think he probably doesn't have a daze. There's no sense holding up mana for this, so we're going to play Recruiter. Uh, we got Apprentice here rather than Painter. I'm not completely sure if that's right. At this point, I'm kind of expecting this Engineer and probably even the second one to get killed. So if I put a Grindstone in the graveyard, we're probably just going to end up exposing it to surgical extraction. The other thing is that this Saga is about to fetch up some kind of probably um, either a Pithing Needle or maybe a Soul Guide Lantern. If it goes to get a Pithing Needle on Engineer, then I don't really want to commit to getting a Painter because then the second Engineer, like it'll put Grunch on the graveyard, um, but we'll have to play this other Goblin to get it back. At that point, we're committing a lot of creatures to the board. We've seen the opponent play Pyroclasm last game, um, so I don't know if I really want to do that. And of course, the opponent could just have the regular spate of red and white removal. And if the opponent has a bunch of removal, then I'd rather get the card that comes with two bodies. And if he, for some reason, does not remove this Apprentice and doesn't remove the Goblins, then we get to just start swapping Apprentice back and forth. And I think that might be enough to just carry the game, even without having to go for the combo. So basically, what we're looking to do is kind of grind down his available removal and then draw into the combo naturally at some point. Okay, so the opponent does get a Soul Guide Lander, and he does have some constructs. And constructs are kind of a problem since we don't really have a great way to get them off the table. We could use this Lightning Bolt, but Bolt is kind of earmarked for Monkey. Um, Top deck Blood Moon, and uh, the question is, do we want to run into Daze or not? The risk of there's a tension between playing the Plateau, which could get wastelanded, and playing around Daze, which requires us to play a Plateau, all that stuff. But I think at this point, if he trades the one land for my one land, given that we don't need the white mana, uh, I think we're probably still in fine shape. Most we can cast all the stuff in our hand anyway. And opponent force is pitching a Hercules Recall, so Recall not very good on this board. And at this point, I'm just chumping. I do want to keep both the goblins in play, but I also do want to deal at least one damage to one of these constructs whenever possible, because that makes it less enticing for the opponent to pyroclasm away the board, because it would cost him one of his own constructs. But at some point, the plan is going to be to either use Apprentice and Goblins to just repeatedly chump block one or both of these constructs, or just get constructs of our own with our own Urza Saga to block them, or just draw into combo pieces and completely ignore them. I really would rather save this bolt for a Painter. Opponent has Stifle for a Goblin Engineer. At this point, I'm pretty sure there are not any dazes, so I'm just playing out the Grindstone. And again, I want to deal one damage to one of these constructs. I don't think we need all these goblins, so I throw away an Engineer to save 3 life and prevent Pyroclasm. Now that we've drawn the second bolt, and we still have not seen a monkey, and the opponent only has 2 cards in hand, and if he had a monkey, I think he would have played it. I'm going to go ahead and use the 2 bolts to clear up these constructs. That allows us to play Apprentice on an empty board, which I think should be pretty good. Lotus Petal not so good usually at game states like this, but it ends up being pretty good, at least somewhat good here. Opponent has swords for the Apprentice, but since we have the Lotus Petal, we're at least able to put the Apprentice in the graveyard rather than getting exiled by swords. That doesn't really accomplish much. It still ends up in exile, but it forces him to crack that Soul Guide Lantern. So now, any artifact that goes to the graveyard, goblins are active again, and we can put artifacts in the graveyard on Grindstone. And might as well get in for one. Since we have the bolt to deal with the monkey anyway, Grindstone away a couple of lands so we don't have to draw. No sense playing out the city into face of active wasteland. Opponent has a non-haste Sagavan, so mill ourselves again. Still did not hit an artifact. And I bolted the monkey basically so I can fearlessly attack with this Thopter. At this point, it's not out of the question if we draw an Urza Saga, for example, that this game comes down to combat damage. Yeah, and I'm milling myself here in case I find a painter. I might rather swap the Thopter token for a painter that we mill and then use the painter to block. But we did not hit one. Uh, the only artifacts we have in the graveyard are Lotus Petal and Portable Hole, which aren't very useful at the moment. So now that we finally drew something useful that we can use the City of Traders for, we're going to play it in the face of Wasteland, grab the painter, and we have a lot of protection for it now against any kind of removal. And this is looking like a desperation cantrip sequence out of the opponent, looking for removal. Prismatic Ending on Grindstone would only be marginally. The opponent doesn't find it, and we just get to untap and combo them out. So that was a tough game. I'm not quite sure whether it was correct to get the Apprentice there instead of a Painter. It worked out well the way it played out. But anyway, I don't know. So we won. We went 5-0 in the league, and even with naming the wrong color for Painter Servant in round 4, but you live and learn.